Hello everybody, welcome back to the workshop. So in this video, I'm going to be taking some copper round rod, some 16 mil or 5/8 inch round bar of copper, and I'm going to be turning it into a pair of tongs. We're starting with 7 inches of material, or 175 millimeters for you guys across the pond, and then we are going to take and draw out our reins and our boss and our nibs out of it. Now you may be asking, why make a pair of copper tongs? Aren't those going to heat up? And you're exactly 100% correct. In here, wrapped up in this nice little bundle, is a pair of copper jawed tongs that I made out of a piece of steel. Obviously I made steel, and then I drilled and tapped some insert bits to be able to hold my copper work, so this way I wouldn't have any sort of marring finish. And when I get to my finish work, I use these tongs to hold this while I do torch colors and other things, so I don't scratch up and mar all the polishing work that I've put into them. One way of doing that real quick, if you do have a pair of steel tongs and you're trying to turn them soft, just wrap some terry cloth towels around the jaws themselves, get them wet, and that makes a great option. They stick right on there. And those are just like your standard blue mechanic towels, blue shop towels. So that's the reason for making these. These are not forging tongs. You do not want to use these in the forge, as the metal will heat up the copper, and the copper has a very high conductivity rate, and so therefore whatever is hot out here, even if it looks like it's slightly charred out here, it'll be 1,000 degrees before you know it, clear out here at the end, and you will scald your hands. So don't do that. So you will need a pair of tongs properly fitted to the material at hand, so this way you can work it. We're going to start by drawing out the reins first, and then we will work on the jaw section secondary. At all times, you want to make sure that you keep not only the copper, but the surface of your anvil clean from scale or dust or grime, as that will all impregnate into the copper and leave a bunch of pitted up mess that'll leave a bunch of cold shuts and things like that in your final piece, which you'll be unhappy with. So copper likes really clean surfaces if you can do it. So I'll go ahead and go over the measurements again one more time before I get into it. We have a 7-inch long piece of 5/8 inch round copper bar stock. I have measured off 50 millimeters or 2 inches from one end, and then I made an inch section that will become the boss, and then the rest will get drawn out in the material. The other 4 inches or so of material will be drawn out. So for you guys across the pond, that is 50 mil from the end, 25 mil, or a total of 75 mil is how you lay this out, with 100 mil left over, and that is how to lay out the stock. So let's get right into it. I'll get this hot and annealed, and I'll be right back with you as soon as we're ready to draw out the reins. So we have this piece nice and hot. We're going to get a good grip from what will become the nibs of the copper, and we're going to scrape this off, make sure there's nothing on it, and now we're going to go ahead and draw this down with our center punch marks up, using the horn of the anvil. And you're going to find out very quickly that copper is an absolute beautiful thing to draw out by hand, but don't get carried away. Copper likes to work harden, and as the copper work hardens, it's a little harder to feel under the hammer than steel. When you work with steel, you can definitely know and tell that as the material cools down, it's not something you want to keep hammering on, and you can feel an instant rebound. Copper, not so much. So you're going to want to anneal this often, but you can see we can get quite a bit of work done just over the horn in one heat. I'm going to put it back in. Now as this heats up and we continue to draw, I'm going to talk a little bit about the properties of copper. So copper can be worked two ways. It can be worked cold or it can be worked hot. So if you don't have a pair of tongs that you can hold this bar with, go ahead and heat the whole thing up. Grab it with whatever you've got, a pair of pliers, and cool off the whole section in the slack tub, and you can work it by hand just by holding it then. You won't get as long as a work time as you do hot. Problem with working the material hot is, yes, it's really soft, but because of that softness, as before mentioned, if you've got any sort of scale or junk or nicks or anything on your anvil, it's going to show up and propagate throughout your forging, which is definitely no bueno, no good. So you want to make sure that you scrape off anything, any artifacts from the forge, and keep your anvil clean. So I like drawing out my tong reins rectangular because I feel that it gives me a lot sturdier tong reins. Well, it's not just that I feel, it's a fact of physics. It's harder to bend a bar edgeways because there's more mass supporting it than as if you made this thing all, let's say, a 3/8 or 9 mil round diameter rod. It's not going to have the surface tension that this rectangular shape will, and so therefore it won't be as nice at giving you resistance or springiness. So again, you can see just in 2 heats, we've gotten this drawn out quite a bit. And now it's down at the range where I want to stop working it. As you go along, you want to compare it to your other tongs. As you can tell, I still got quite a bit of range to go yet with this, but I'm getting real close. So once I take out some of the material thickness, I'll be right in the ballpark. As this thins down, it is easier to heat. So watch your heats. If you burn copper, much like when you burn steel, you've ruined the structural capabilities of the copper at that point in time. So that'll bring me into my next point. When you're working and making these tongs, you say, okay, the tongs, you're making them out of copper. The copper's really soft even when it's cold and been annealed. Don't you want to make sure that you don't end up making them too soft? Aren't the reins just going to bend when you bite on something? And that's where taking advantage of copper's work hardening capabilities is going to come into play. You're going to really want to take advantage of that work hardening capabilities later on in the project when we cold finish these pieces. We're going to cold work them, and that cold working is going to take and provide us that amount of resistance that we need. So we don't want to draw this to full length just yet. We just want it to be close to final dimensions that we're working for. So we're going to look at this. I'm going to line up my boss areas, yada yada, and we're pretty close there. I've got about another inch I got to draw out, but that's fine by the time that I flatten out my boss area. So the next step is we're going to go ahead and work on the actual boss portion. And I can't see the remnants of it here. So it must have either been top, bottom, can't remember which. Okay, that was on top. Just looking at it here, seeing where my punch marks are. It doesn't really matter at this point. So I've drawn this thing down flat. So now I've got to take and turn this at a 45-degree angle, just like I did this one, on the near side of the anvil. And we're going to set down the boss area on the near side of the anvil. Remember, we're working on drawing out the reins and boss area, but we're kind of working in reverse like you would do on a normal set of tongs. So I'll get this hot again, and now we're going to take and heat up even further back here. So I'll reclamp. We're going to heat up further back on the piece, and we're going to take and set down that boss area. So I'm going to push the tong reins through the fire, all the way through the fire, and I'm going to try to get it hot just a little further on back. So right here is a perfect example of if you have a pair of, if you're trying to make these, you could take and quench these, bring it up to a nice cherry red heat, cool it off in a slack tub, and then you've got all the time in the world to kind of figure out your angle that you want to set down your area and get stuff really laid out nicely for yourself. Now's the time to do that. Because you can. Because copper will give you that workability, as where with steel, you know, time is of the essence, right? Time's of the essence with steel, and so you don't get as much workability with the steel. So we're almost to temp now. We're only looking for cherry reds to maybe dull oranges in the copper. That's the proper annealing temperatures. We're not trying to go crazy or go way above that. We just want little bits. We just want the right temp to take and do the job or the work at hand. So that's what we're going to work on now. We've got that good. I'm going to find that side that I want it to be on. I'm going to turn it at my 45-degree angle, and I'm going to set it down. And all I'm doing is I'm working that boss into the reins that we have already drawn out. And then I'm thinning those reins up ever so slightly to match. And now we'll check it against our other piece. We're getting pretty close. And while it's still hot, I'm going to set off what looks to be about that inch of material area that I needed. I'm going to set that off, half on, half off blows. We're going to drive that area down to start the reins of our tongs. We're just going to transition that right in. Now I'm just kind of cold working it down into the lower temperatures to get that area where I want it. So those half on, half off blows worked fine. You want to be careful not to over forge it, otherwise you'll get a waste up here. It'll get real thin right where the transition's going to be. So be careful, don't over forge it too much, and you'll be okay. So now I need to heat this piece back up, and I'm going to quench it off, and now I'm going to work on the actual jaw section to make it like the other. So I'll heat just that section up, get it up nice and hot, and as that gets up nice and hot, that will allow me, once that's nice and warmed up, we'll quench that whole piece off, and then I can hold it by hand to work on the jaw. So as you can see, this is an absolute lovely material to work with. Copper is. The rod that I'm using is actually grounding stake rod. This is something that you would do to electrically ground a house. You may contact maybe a local electrician in your area and see if they're getting rid of any ground rod, or if you can buy some ground rod. They're usually 8 to 10 foot in length. Some of them can be 6 feet. I'm sure they sell them in different sizes. And they may just sell you a used ground rod that they've pulled up, and that could be a real big win. So we've got that nice and cooled off. I'm shooting this straight through because that's the easiest thing to do. And we're going to check our tongs. The fit's going to be nicely. It's going to fit nicely. So now it's time to just draw down the actual jaw area. And all we're doing there is basically squaring it up. And you can do whatever shape you want. For me, my only interest is having a pair of flat jaw tongs to hold flat plate. So just make it the same length jaw, draw it out about the same length as what you've already got. You want to check the length of your reins. As you can see, I need to pull out a little more thickness on the one side because my reins aren't exactly alike. And we'll go right here and give it a little length in that thickness. And here's where this cold working comes into play. You're going to work this cold. And as you work this cold, it's going to harden up on you, which is what we want. And I still got a lot more material, meat that I need to pull out of that, so I might reheat that one more time. Just to get that extra little bit of length out of it that I need. So you just keep working on that and tuning it until these reins will match up nicely. So the next step, we will drill this out over at the drill press and then come back and rivet it. The drilling is going to go like any other type of drilling for tongs. Find your center, which is usually somewhere between, for those of you that don't know this trick, if you draw a line from this corner of this jaw here to the back of the rein here, you can draw from the bottom of the jaw up to the top of where the rein's at. That's how you find your center punch area to take and center punch that to drill it out for your hole. Yes, I recommend drilling these, not punching them. With the copper, you're going to have a lot of suck down with copper. So again, we'll just take and drill these out. You guys will see that. Once I get this drilled out, I'll be back with you and we will rivet them together and get them set up, that final stage. So now that we've got both these halves drilled and we've got a little bit of cleanup work, we made sure that our shoulders are going to work out nicely, made sure our fit is good. You can do with this with a file or a belt sander. Everything's going to continue as the same as any other tong video that I have made in the past, or as you have seen probably before. If you need to take and watch a tong tutorial video where I've went real in depth about how to make these rivet headers or this rivet set here that I'm about to use, I have made videos on all of these, including an entire tong playlist and an entire riveting playlist. All you have to do is go to the playlist section on the channel and search out riveting or tongs and put that in the search engine and you will find all the videos that I have done. I have done probably 50 or so videos around different processes, around tongs and riveting and so on and so forth. So go check those videos out. I have in-depth and then I have brief overview and brief mentions about all those different things in those videos. So the next step, we've got the piece that we're going to use, which is a 3/8 inch diameter or 9 mil diameter copper rod. Again, this is just a grounding rod or something you would use. Sometimes you'll see them on top of people's houses for like electrical storm type stuff, for lightning rods, things like that. That's what this rod is. I picked it up at my local scrapyard. You can find them probably online or just buy the diameter rod you need, which is probably cheaper than trying to scrounge, but in the long run, as far as timing is concerned. Anyways, so that's the rod. I've got it heated up in the fire. I've went ahead and went all the way around and I've kind of severed it to where there's only a little shred left. That is so this way these pieces can be colder and the rivet that's going in them is hotter, so the rivet is softer than what these pieces are. These pieces have been work hardened with the hammer at the anvil and then we've been cleaning them up ever so slightly. You can make these as shiny as you like. I'm going to go for simplicity here when it comes to the actual tongs themselves. Do what you like. So at first we're going to go just to the straight anvil because we need to upset a little bit of mass, because with whenever you drill copper, sometimes if you push the bit too quickly, through the material, you can actually get it to kind of expand a bit, and so you don't get a true 3/8 inch round hole or 9 mil round hole. So we're going to go ahead and bring this out. It's at a dark, dull red heat. We're going to lay our tongs together. We're going to push this piece through. Again, your tongs should be work hardened at this point. We'll push this piece through, get it through both halves of the tongs, and we're going to twist that off. Go ahead and just drop that on the floor. And now we just want to do a little bit of a balancing act while it's on the anvil. You've got a little bit of time here because this rivet's going to stay fairly soft for a while. So just make sure you're about where you need to be, set up right, and then we're going to just upset ever so lightly. We're going to rotate it over, upset it a little bit lightly. So this way we overcome any sort of bending or any weirdness that might be happening. Make sure we keep it centered. We're going to upset it flat at first, and that's going to take it down to where it starts setting the tongs together. Then we're going to switch it over to using our rivet heading tools so we can drive a really nice round rivet home on this piece. So take your time with this. As with copper being very soft, it goes pretty quick. Just make sure it's doing right. And we're going to have to adjust these tongs after this rivet's set. And we do a few more things to it, but we want to go ahead and get this rivet good and set down first. Sorry if it sounds I'm a bit nasally today, guys. So there you go. We got round here. It is like 12 degrees in the shop right now as the recording of this video. Actually, it's probably less than that. It was 12 degrees when I came out to the shop, and it's slowly falling. This is nightfall as the recording of this video, about 8 p.m. in the evening, so you can tell it's probably getting pretty cold. Okay, so that's about as far as we're going to want to go with that for right now. And now we need to take and heat these up like we would normally do, but here's the exception. We can't hold on to these, so we are going to heat these up, get them to soften ever so slightly. We're going to go up to a very, very dull red. This isn't the high range of red that you can go to, or orange, where it will really be soft. Just a barely get any sort of red color in it. We'll soften it ever so slightly, but it won't take it all the way to its fullest softest extent. So we're going to go ahead and heat it until it turns, again, like a light red. And then we're going to cool it off in the slack tub. And then we will be able to fit our tongs and our jaws, and with a little bit of working and everything, stuff should harden up, and I'll show you how to re-harden the tongs so they don't get a lot of flex here in this next step. It's always crucial to work harden your tongs, your copper tongs, so this way they don't get a bunch of flexing and weirdness. Okay, we're almost there, and you get a little bit more heat into it. At this point, I like to just point out, if you guys made it to this point in the video, hashtag copper sure is pretty. That's your secret passcode. We've been doing those for the super fans that get on these videos, that watch these big long tutorials. I just thank you so much for your watch time. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to watch this video all the way to the end. I do greatly appreciate that. It means a lot because I put a lot of effort into these videos, and it just wouldn't be worth it if you all weren't watching. So thank you so much for that. That's a great way of supporting this channel non-monetarily, is by watching. So there we go. That's a little higher than what I was wanting, but I wasn't paying attention, so that's what happens when you don't pay attention. I'll cool that off. That's good enough. Be careful while these are wet, because you can drive some steam, have some steam issues. So now we're going to bend our reins down where we want them. The regular tongs, they're not going to want to go. So we're going to drive this joint where we want it. Some more. Make sure that that rounded joint is together. The rivet's fully set now. And now we'll set this hammer down. Get rid of that. And now we're going to just adjust our tongs like you normally would. Just adjust your tong jaws in order. Make sure your reins are about like you like them for when it's fully closed. And that's all part of working this right now. It's going to feel weird, I'm not going to lie, hitting on, you know, cold material. We're so used as blacksmiths to take and heat everything up. But you don't have to take and do that. And now, just like as if this was hot, how you would work it, you need to be somewhat hardened up in order for you to work this tong joint out back and forth. And I highly recommend dunking this in some oil to work this back and forth. So your reins have got to harden up, your jaws have got to harden up before you can take and work this joint open back and forth effectively. They have to work hardened somewhat to a degree. So they're going to bend around a bit on you. That's okay. Just keep hardening them up until they're finished work hardening. And the way we finish work hardening these is just as what you're seeing me do here right now. There's nothing really special about this that I'm doing. All I'm doing is just lightly tapping on the tongs. As you lightly tap on them, it's going to take and harden the copper. It's kind of like the coat hanger effect. As you bend a coat hanger back and forth, it tightens up, right? So that's basically what you're doing. You know, just be careful not to do it too much, because as like in the coat hanger example, if you hammer on stuff too much, what'll end up happening to you is things will break. So there we go. I'm going to have to get a little bit of a pry bar chisel of some sort. Get that out of there. Yeah. I'm going to do this to open this piece up, open the jaws up a bit. And then work it back. There we go. You'll want to put some oil. Again, you'll want to put some oil on these to loosen that friction of the copper against each other. So I'll do that and I'll be right back with you. And then that will show you how these will be fully finished up. But if you want to go ahead and leave the video now, you can go right ahead, because there's the finished pair of tongs. So we'll oil the joint. You know what? I'll just call it good right now. That'll be good. You just oil the joint and just work it back and forth. You guys seen that a million times. Not enough content there to keep you guys for another 20 minutes. So again, that's how you make a pair of copper jawed tongs. I hope you guys found that informative and helpful. I know that it's kind of a bit nuanced. You'd be like, well, yeah, I mean, once you know how to make a pair of tongs, they're all the same, but copper introduces its own bit of difficulty. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. As always, God bless you, and we'll catch you on the next one.